2, 1. And we are live to the world. Welcome today. My name's Jason Cooper on behalf of Serenity Radio. And I have a lovely guest with me today, Suzanne Doyle. She is a mind coach with the Irish Institute of NLP. She's also a domestic abuse prevention trainer. I'm not quite sure what that means, but she will tell me a little bit more in detail about how she's worked, how she got into what she's doing, and she can share her knowledge because I've heard her speak before and she's incredible. And how Suzanne and I met was through the Irish Institute of NLP. Like, I'm a mind coach just as well as she is, so that's how we know. And she's happy enough to come on today and speak about her area of expertise, and more so really just to build up more awareness for domestic abuse and to know the telltale signs of that, and just to educate people, because it happens absolutely everywhere behind closed doors. Like, she's more of an expert than I am, so introduce you to Suzanne. So Suzanne, welcome. Thank you very much for coming on board today. Could you tell me a little bit about your background before we get into everything else?
Hi, Jason. Thank you so much for having me on. So as you said, I'm a mind coach. But before that, prior to that, I began working in domestic abuse support work. So I've been working in frontline services for the last 15 years. And, that would include a helpline, one-to-one support, court accompaniments, also working in the family court in Dublin and in refuge. So I've supported both men and women. The majority obviously were women, but I've worked with men as well. So basically what I do now is I design and deliver seminars and training. So awareness training, as you mentioned, it's getting the education out there. It's for people to, I suppose, raise their awareness and their understanding, and so they can identify when there is something abusive going on. So whether that's with their own relationships, whether that's with a colleague, a friend, a niece, a student, because I would deliver this to teachers. But I also have a program that I deliver to students. So it's for those, for teenagers to recognize signs of abuse, to recognize when there's coercive control at play. And thankfully, we have a new legislation actually since 2018 around coercive control, which is fantastic to have in place. So things are moving forward. But it's just, if we could raise the awareness and the education around the signs, because there's so many red flags, Jason. And as we were talking about this before, I know we've had quite a few conversations around this over the years. And, and there are telltale signs, there are warning signs, there are red flags. So if you know what they are, they can be recognized, they can be identified, and then it can prevent an abusive relationship from taking hold or moving forward into long-term abuse, a long-term abusive relationship, which yourself as a mind coach, you've worked one-to-one with clients who would have to deal with PTSD, or having lived through trauma related to domestic abuse. So that's where I'm at the moment.
Okay, so how did you get into this? Because you've been doing it for 15 years. What prompted you to get into this? Was there something going on, or you just thought you just had I'm probably guessing here, but I'm sure you can give me a little bit more of a detail about that. What made you sort of push into this direction in your career when you 15 years ago or whenever it was?
Yeah, it is a bit of a strange one. I was actually a tennis coach at the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, so that John McEnroe thing where they throw the racket down and get into annoying. I'm joking.
Yeah, I was encouraging kids to do that every day. It gets their attention and it intimidates the opponent. I know, seriously. So I was a tennis coach, and I actually a local newsletter came in the door, and they were looking for. I didn't even know there was a domestic abuse service in my area at the time. So that would have been 2005. And it's something that I've always been passionate about. It's something that I've always wanted to do something. I never thought I'd be able to do, but it's always, I don't like injustice. I hate abuse of any kind. So it's always triggered something in me. if I see people being treated, less than fairly. So I saw this, they were looking for volunteers, and I said, well, sure, look, I'll give them a ring anyway.
Yeah.
And so, I was chatting to them, went in for an interview. So then there was an intensive 8-week training to do it.
Okay.
And the training happened to be on a day off. So everything worked organically,
Okay.
so I was a volunteer with them for a year. So I would have been working on the helpline as a
Okay.
volunteer, and that would have been obviously supervised and stuff like that. So then
Yeah.
I actually began working for the service. They actually asked me to come on, so I was working for them part-time, and then I became coordinator of the service. So in all of those years, so in 2008 I was doing coordinator, and then I started training as a trainer. So and I would have been then training volunteers in, and I love the training part. I love sharing this information because it's such valid information. And
Of course.
that's, and I would have been doing quite a lot of support work, one-to-one helpline. And, but it was the training that, you could see people were getting so much from it, as in they never knew these patterns, or,
Of
so
course.
then they were able to then use them in their work. So we would have done training with statutory agencies, voluntary groups, community organisations, all across the board, basically. And I would have worked in a refuge as well as working in the
Oh,
helpline as
wow.
well. So I was doing both. And then I was also working in the support and referral service in this family courts there in Dolphin House in Dublin. So lots of areas that I was able to gain experience. And and the reason that I'm in this job, the reason that I've wanted to progress into prevention, it's listening to the thousands of stories, the thousands of lives that are affected by this issue. I mean,
Yeah.
nobody is immune to it, Jason. Like,
Of
nobody is
course.
immune to it. There's no demographic that it's specified towards. It's a universal. I've worked with people from all over the world dealing with the same issues. And although the patterns of abuse are the same, the tactics that are used are the same. It's like, I remember discussing this with colleagues, and we were saying it's like the abuser comes from the same college. They all do the same
Really?
tactics. Yeah, like, it's crazy how the tactics. So we've been able to, when we're talking to someone and supporting them, listening to their story, I've been able to say, and my colleagues as well have been able to say to people, just be careful, because you can recognize a pattern, and you say, this may happen next. So if this happens, maybe, you might need to contact this service, or, just be careful, or, and then they might ring me back a few weeks later and say, how did you know that was going to happen? That's exactly what happened.
Really?
And it's, and that's how predictable this pattern is. So the more,
what are the patterns to look for when you're in this place, whether it's man, woman, or whoever's thought it is? Is there a particular pattern that you look for? Describe to me what that pattern actually is, just so we can articulate it for the people that are listening, so they can understand it. And if they know someone that is in that place, they might be able to help.
Yeah. Well, basically, it's a four-step process. I just simplify it. Obviously, the dynamics of it are pretty complex, but to break it down into 4 steps, there's the whirlwind romance. The beginning of, and that can be confused. Like, that can be any relationship. It's the whirlwind. But in that first step, there are a lot of telltale signs. So when it is actually literally a roller coaster. You're brought up, you're brought down, and it's so intense. So it's the early talk of long-term commitment, having a child together, and it's like, we're only together 2-3 weeks, or it's talking about children's names, talking about, and that can happen in one of the love at first sight instant.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that actually. It's the love at first sight, that the Australian one that's on the TV at the moment, which is, I think it's quite scary actually in a certain amount of time, but I find that a little bit scary. But I'm probably stretching it a little bit longer than where you're going to at the moment. But those sort of shows make a sort of negative impact on this type of thing. Like, tell me more about the step process.
Okay, so I'll give you the 4 headings that I would go by, and and this is through my experience of working in this area. It's through all the research that I've been doing over the last number of years. So you have number 1 is the whirlwind. So it's like a roller coaster. There's too much too soon. There's, exclusivity, and it's like they're there 24/7.
Yep.
And they're in your head. They're on the phone. Why, and in that, there's the little warning signs, why didn't you pick up the first time I rang you? Oh, sorry, I was in the bathroom. Oh, yeah, well, and there's little things, and I'll go back to that. But the second one, then, it kind of goes into jealousy and possessiveness. So it's a transition. It's a smooth transition. And when you're in that roller coaster, you don't know, what's up or down. So it's very hard to be objective and to step back. And that's the whole idea. You can't rationalize when you're in this. That's why you're brought this way and that way, because so someone objective, someone that's looking in, this information could be very valuable because they can recognize it because they're not involved emotionally. So then it goes on then when it goes to the jealousy and possessiveness, and then it can become, it's because I love you. That's why I do this, I'm collecting you because I want you to be safe. And it's like, well, there could be a woman or a man in their 30s or 40s. It's like, well, I kind of know how to cross the road on my own, but, and then you could be thinking, oh, well, they care about me. They want me to be safe. But it's like, it's full on. They might turn up when you're out. They might, and just be there to collect you. And with I don't want anyone to, I trust you, but I don't trust someone else, so there's a lot. And again, it can be confused with someone who genuinely is worried about their partner. It's not about jumping to conclusions when you see 1 or 2 little red flags. It's about exploring it. So knowing when to explore, when to kind of look, take a step back, take stock, or even ask someone, is this, I'm a bit kind of caught up, does this seem normal to you? And tell them what's going on.
Yeah,
and then, and because then the switch happens, and the switch, again, it could take 6 weeks, it could take 5 years, and the switch usually happens when the abuser knows that they have that person, when they're at their lowest, when they're at the most vulnerable.
So it's control, isn't it? So they got control and they got dominance over that person, as well as I can imagine that.
Yeah, it's when that person could be the most dependent on them. So they have created this dependency through the step 1 and step 2, and they may go back to step 1 and step 2 a few times, and then the switch happens when they're needed most, when they're at the lowest. They could be grieving. They could be grieving a parent or a sibling, or, and that's when they might dig the knife in and twist it. And then you just, that's when, and every person I have spoken to is able to identify, look back on reflection, identify when that switch happened. So, and I remember talking to you before, and, one story that stays in my mind was the switch happened when she had just had her baby, and everything was blissful. She was so happy. She was only with him, I think, two months when she got pregnant, but she, he was nurturing everything that should be in place. And when she was breastfeeding him at her most vulnerable, you are at your most vulnerable.
Yeah.
Not your most vulnerable. You are in a vulnerable position when you're breastfeeding a baby.
Yeah.
So that's when he snapped. To her, it was out of the blue. He picked up the cot and threw it at her, while the baby was, so that was not only the trauma and the shock of that, it was, where did this come from? And it was twisted around. Well, it's your fault. That's unnatural to be breastfeeding a baby boy. You're creating, he made it something very dirty. He made it. So that's when that switch happened. But she had nowhere to go then, because he had taken her away from her family. They don't, and on an emotional level and a physical level.
Yeah.
She had nobody to turn to, because the way it was, she chose him over her family because they didn't really take to him. And they had their reasons, because they could see what was going on and she couldn't, because she was involved so emotionally. So, and then it's the blame game. Then it turns to blame. It's
Mm-hmm.
your fault that I'm unhappy. It's your fault I'm angry. It's your fault they got beaten up because you shouldn't have looked at them. It's your fault. And when this gets in, when this is told to you, and there's a lot of gaslighting, there's so much emotional abuse going on right through. It's you feel that it is your fault. What have I done? What could
Mm-hmm.
I do to make him happy or her
Yeah.
happy? What did I do wrong? I made a nice dinner, or I was quiet. I kept everything quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Why had she or he suddenly just done this? So you then become responsible for their happiness, and
Mm-hmm.
you become responsible for their unhappiness. You become responsible for their behavior. And another thing to look at in that is, who are they blaming for all of their problems?
Mm-hmm.
Do they constantly blame, I'm late because it was such a person's fault, it was this,
Mm-hmm.
it was that, da da da. Or I'm like this because of this upbringing, I'm like this because of that. If someone is consistently blaming someone else or
Mm-hmm.
something else on everything that they do,
Everyone else apart from their own responsibility, by the sound of it.
yeah, and as a mind coach and all the
Yeah.
NLP we have done, you cannot change someone else's behavior.
Yep.
You are not responsible for someone else's behavior.
Mm-hmm.
You can influence it, but everybody has their own responsibility over their own actions.
Absolutely. And you have to get everyone like that. They have to recognize it and understand there is a problem there. And also, they have to get buy-in to speak about it. They have to get buy-in from themselves that something's not quite right. And before you can get that, it works in lots of different scenarios. Obviously, within what you're doing is it's a massive buy-in. I can imagine from the person that is doing the abuse, the domestic. They have to recognize it themselves that something's not quite right in themselves, and they need to change their actions, or something else needs to happen. The person that is having the abuse, they need to recognize it, because they're probably in that little love bubble where sometimes they can't see the wolf in the trees, if you know what I mean. They're probably, their head is like stuck in that bubble and they can't see their way out. What do you do in those scenarios? How do you help those people see sense? Whether sense is the right word, how do you get them to see that things might not be right? What do you do in those circumstances?
Well, first of all, and that's what you're saying there is, when the head is, they're in that bubble, and that goes
Yep.
back to the first stage of the whirlwind.
Mm-hmm.
It's because during that whirlwind, the abuser, they're very skilled at manipulating.
Yeah.
They're very skilled at getting what they want, and they're
Mm-hmm.
very skilled at identifying vulnerabilities. And if they
Mm-hmm.
don't know your vulnerabilities, they will find out, and they
Yep.
will listen intently. And anything that you share with them that might have happened in the past, maybe previous trauma, previous
Mm-hmm.
abuse, or anything, that will come back and bite you. That will be thrown in your face at a later stage and over again, to just down, to really, really keep you down. And they will see there's a very skillful part of this, and it's where they will get you to, it's like an oath of secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
So they test you. Especially in the first stage of the whirlwind, there are so many tests that the abuser
Mm-hmm.
will put the target in through, and will they keep the secret? Because an abuser does not want to be found out, because
Of course.
it's very hard to profile an abuser as in just watching what they do outside the home. They could be the most charitable, outgoing, most gentlest, chattiest person. They could be the most quietest person, timidest,
Yeah.
and just look, harmless, that word harmless that people use for, but it's looking at it's so they can put on this act, but there's always a slip. There's only
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
much, it's only so long you can hold. I'm so perfect, but some of them do it really, really well and really skillfully. So, but it's they will, how they kind of get someone into that oath of secrecy. So they will say, I'm going to tell you something that I've never told anyone before, but I need you to, to really keep this
To yourself.
confidential,
Yeah.
because someone betrayed me before and it killed me. I couldn't do that again. And I know I could never trust anybody who could possibly do. So then they're testing you to see,
Mm.
are you going to, and then they create this victim like kind of persona that, you know, this is why they behave like this, but you're the only one who can fix me. You're the only one who can get me through this. So the person that's being abused is that's why they might defend them so much. If someone spots that they've just, you know, they've witnessed a horrific abusive situation, and, you know, it's like, no, you don't know the real them. You don't know there, you know, there's a reason behind that, and I can't tell you, I can't share that with you, you know. So they're caught up in this, you know, secrecy, but they're thinking that, no, they need me, and sometimes that's why they'll stay at the beginning, you know,
Of
and that's
course, yeah.
why they, you know, and then it's the chipping away, the emotional, you know, chipping away of the self-esteem, the self-confidence, you know, the isolation. Isolation is a huge part of this grooming process. And remember at the presentation we were doing with the IAMC, and, you know, and I was talking about the grooming process, and even Brian was saying about the, you know, how similar it is to paedophile grooming.
Yeah, no, it's exactly the same. There's lots of other types of grooming that you have in the paedophile, but then you have the relationship side, and then you have there's lots of big groups and institutions where they groom people in to think a certain way, a certain sect, and it's probably extreme religion cults out there that are grooming certain types of characters to be in those types of groups. But I suppose one-on-one like that is it's mind-blowing, really, how people can manipulate from all types of characters, and whether they're perceived to be nice or professional, or they're upper class, lower class, middle class, doesn't really matter about race, religion, color, or whatever. It's still done exactly the same way. But that's it's fascinating, but it's also quite scary that people are actually going through that.
Yeah.
So tell me, how what sort of skills do you have, or learnt skills along the way that really sort of add value to what you're doing to sort of break through this silence of people? How do you help people along the way?
Well, when I'm doing support work, if I'm working one-on-one with someone going through this, and I realize I completely avoided your question last time, and what I learned about. So, you know, what do you do in that situation to support someone? First of all, you listen. You just listen, you know, because people that are in that situation, they will second guess. They will say, because they've been told by their abuser, you're overreacting, you're too sensitive, you're crazy. You know, maybe you're like your mother or your father, you know, it's running in the family. If there's any mental health issues in the family, you know, all these things are used against. So it's just listening and letting someone say out exactly what it is to say now. And they might go this, and they'll have a full-blown conversation with themselves, you know, and it's just, you're just a soundboard, you know, and it's being there. It's being present, not jumping in with you should, you need to, you have to. That's the last thing they need to hear. They've been controlled through all of this relationship. They don't need you doing it as well, you know. So it's really just giving them, you know, giving them that soundboard. Let them hear themselves say it out loud, and then it's doing it with empathy, you know. And I can very easily step into people's shoes, and, you know, and I will be there with them in that space when they're going through that sadness, that realization that, you know, and I'm literally there with them every step of the way. Thankfully, I can then step out of it, you know, and go on to, you know, and separate from it, because I would be no use to them if I'm being triggered or if I'm staying in that place all of the time. I need to be objective for them as well. So it's really, so, you know, I'd be absolutely, you know, you can be there and, you know, you can really, some of the stories are, you know, they are really tough, but to see them as they're going on with support, with the right supports. There are so many supports out there, Jason, for men and women. And it's about, first of all, believing what the person is saying.
Of course. Well, I suppose that's the first thing that you have to do, because you can't, you have to be objective to what they're saying, but you also have to go, if they're coming to me for a reason, I've got to listen intently to what they're actually saying, and just to make sure that I'm probably a sounding card as opposed to anything else. And you can't actually say anything else other than just listen and listen. when do you how many sessions does it take, or how many phone calls does it take before you actually start to intervene a little bit? What was it, 2 or 3 or 5? I don't know, because it's
That really depends. It
okay.
depends. Like someone might just ring you and say, "Look, I heard you do this. I'm just looking for, how do I get out of this?" It depends on what stage they're at.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I don't lead them and I don't
Mm-hmm.
pull them back.
Okay.
I literally just walk beside them and I will guide them. I will offer options. I will, offer, and I will also go through safety plans. So
Okay.
there's no one safety plan fits all, but I do have, when I do my full module program, the training
Mm-hmm.
program, I do have safety plans that can be tailored individually.
Okay.
But like a tick box, well, to make sure, because I mean, as I remember, I was saying it to you before, the most dangerous time for anyone in an abusive relationship is when they just make the decision to leave,
Mm-hmm.
and up to 18 months afterwards.
Okay.
That's when most of them are murdered, because if they change their behavior in any way, it's spotted immediately. And so it's good to have the right supports, the right
Mm-hmm.
information. So yourself, like, information is powerful, so it's to have the right supports. There are
Mm-hmm.
always supports out there. So what I would do is I hear what they want to do. I listen to what they want to do. If they're in a position, if they're saying, I want out of this, I
Mm-hmm.
can't do this anymore. And I had someone who was in their probably late 70s, mid 70s, late 70s. She had gone through this her whole life.
Oh
But
God.
she said, even if I only live for another few months, I want to do it in peace.
Yeah.
So she wanted out. So it depends on where they are. It
Mm-hmm.
really, they're leading it. So if they want support and to still stay in that relationship,
Mm-hmm.
that's their call. And then I will give them the emotional support, to basically be building them back up from the inside. And
Mm-hmm.
that's done through a lot of NLP, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
hypnosis, um, and basically just being there by their side, giving them my strength when they need it, giving them
Mm-hmm.
my shoulder when they need it, until they can then build their own and find their own voice. And if they need me to advocate for them, ring certain places to find out their entitlements or whatever, I'll help them with that until they're ready to make that call themselves. So that's what we would have always done, supporting people. Now with the mind coaching, I would do it slightly different, but still with the same structure in place. They're leading it,
Mm-hmm.
see where they're at. And then I'll ask them, well, okay, I can, and yourself, the NLP is very powerful to be
It
able to
is.
build people up, to be able to collapse anchors, because there's
Mm-hmm.
so many anchors set in
Mm-hmm.
during an abusive relationship. So it's being able to collapse them. So I will ask them, say, well, look, I can do this for you. I can, help you detach emotionally from this area, from this
Mm-hmm.
situation, from this. Is this something you would like to do?
Mm-hmm.
I've never been told no, you know, so I will do that. And yourself, it doesn't take long. It's a short, but it's a very effective thing. But it's with
Mm-hmm.
their full permission, with their full trust,
Yeah.
and it's about having that rapport with somebody. It's about building that rapport and them understanding that confidentiality is a priority in this
I
case.
think so, absolutely, because they're in that relationship where it's full on, and if
Mhm.
they're going to speak to someone else separate, they absolutely need that full on trust, of that privacy, that what is communicated stays in that bubble, doesn't go any further, because probably what's going on inside their brain is going all over the place. That frustration, I don't know, bitterness, lots and lots of emotions going on at the same time. And you probably have heard it a thousand times more than I have, but I can imagine what that's like. And it must be very challenging to do, but you have to stay calm. And I can imagine that you're pretty calm in it. I can hear it in your voice, and your tone is quite calm anyway. So people that are going all over the place, frantic, and they come and see you, it's the first thing is to probably make sure that they relax.
Yeah. And that's it. Like, they need someone that's calm, they need someone that's objective, they need someone that's, that has a hold of themselves. They don't need
Mm-hmm.
someone to match their frantic worry
Yeah,
and their
yeah, yeah.
panic. And, it's just to provide a safe place, a
Mm-hmm.
safe space for them to feel that they can come down, that
Mm-hmm.
they can and so a lot of times they would breathe that sigh of relief,
Yeah, of course.
okay, and not just with me. I'm not saying this is, it's when they meet someone who's there fully to support them and understands the complexities of domestic abuse and understands the dynamics behind it. And just as you mentioned there, about the brain going in a whirl and
Yep.
everything going on. I mean, and not knowing where to go, and as I said to you before, there's no demographic, there's no one immune to this, so people think, oh, if someone has wealth, well then, oh, they can get out of it. Why are they even staying? They're questions that are posed, and sometimes it's more difficult the more connections and the wealth that is there, because if their abuser is connected and they're
Yep.
playing golf, or they go to lunch with a judge or a police inspector or the GP, the friends of the GP, who do they turn to?
Yep.
Who can they trust? Yes, there
So
is
it's up a
supposed to be
level, really, isn't it? It's. I know it's up a sort of social level, but it must be even harder in some instances, because, as you say, it's they're going out and they're dining with all of these judges and doctors and this, that, and the other. So who can they trust within their circle of trust to speak to? Because I suppose when you have your friends and all of that around you and your relatives, they're not the right people to give you advice. They're probably the wrong people to give you advice, because they're telling you what to do, as opposed to sort of listening to what is being said and listening even more, and then to say, well, I think you should maybe speak to that person, because I can't really, I'm not an expert in this area, but I think friends and family are probably the worst people to speak to, in my personal experience. But I don't know what you feel about that.
That you would, I know, I get where you're coming from there,
Yeah.
because someone is, if I'm chatting to my best friend and I'm like, oh no, you don't want to be doing that, it's just a natural thing.
Yeah, it
But
is. Yeah.
when someone comes to you, like as a friend, and it's reaching out to somebody,
Yeah.
that instinctively that you can trust, and even testing the waters. If someone, like, we would always encourage, if someone sees a colleague or a friend or something with a bruise, or say, oh, that looks sore, you okay? It's opening it up. You're not prying. You're not insinuating that, because they may have actually walked into a door. They may have, so, but it's just putting it out there. And then that person might kind of say, well, it's possible that I could maybe talk to them, so it's letting people know. And see, that's the thing about these training programs, the information out there. So if people have this information and your friend does come to you, or a sister or a brother comes to you and say, and they could say, God, actually, I've just learned a little bit about this. I've just done a program, learned. So, and they would have that in black and white. Well, I've this process now, and the person then could identify, actually, yeah, that did happen. Yeah, that happened. So then they can move forward then. And, there's so many, I mean, Safe Ireland have a website, and if you're, for women that can access a support or a helpline or a one-to-one in their area, so that it shows the map of all the support services and the refuges. And for men, there's Men's Aid Ireland as well, and I saw them on Twitter. They have a great page on Twitter, so it's going to the right. It is, like, I know you have friends or sisters or brothers and all, and they'll say, no, you should be doing this. But the more people that are aware of how this works, and then the more people can be of help. So that's why I just, I'd love everybody in the world to have this information and know exactly how it worked, so that they can spot it immediately. It's like, when we were kids, I don't even remember a seatbelt being in the back of this car.
No, I don't. I was thinking that the other day, actually. I don't ever remember that either.
No, and so it certainly wasn't mandatory to wear them.
Yeah.
Now, if you were driving down the road and you have a car in front of you, and there's a child hopping around the back seat, like flying here and flying there, you're like, oh my God, that child's at risk. And you want to do something about it. You might even, it depends on what way you handle these situations.
Yeah.
But straight away you spot there's somebody at risk.
Yeah.
So if you have this information, not just my information, the information is out there. I'm just saying, you know yourself that I do provide this training, but the information is there. So and there's books like Lundy Bancroft has a great book of, how the abuser gets into the mind. And there's Don Hennessy, an Irish guy from Cork. He has a book, How He Gets Into Our Head. So there's a lot of information around there, and it's having it simplified. And when I that's why I was saying there's the 4 steps, and it's simplifying it so that it can be a quick, read or a quick listen, and that people have that. So then they're identifying a risk straight away. So we'd identify if a child is, a 2-year-old is going from this side to that side every time the car is turned. It's like the child is at risk. So it's to be able to identify as quick as that there's someone at risk there.
So I remember you saying actually you teach teachers, because I think that's a really good place to actually instruct from a teacher and education point of view, because if they see kids coming in and they're not quite right because of what's actually happening at home, there must be sort of alarm bells going on in the teacher's eyes saying there's something not quite right with Johnny or Patrick or Mary or whoever it might be. So what do you do to instruct? What do you when you do teach people, because I know you have a program there, but what do you actually teach them to be aware of?
The behavioural changes, especially in teenagers. So now I know most of my program is around intimate relationships, so when they're involved in it. So you're looking at teenagers, because I know all teachers would have done the child protection, the children first, from TUSLA, so that's standard. Everybody should have that. So that would identify if there's a child coming in from an abusive home. So you're looking at the age of 12 up here when the relationship starts. So intimate relationship starts. It is as young as 12. Well, it's probably even younger now.
And all the hormones are flying all over the place, especially when you're in that growth spurt area. And as we all know, my daughter's almost 11 going on 15. So I can understand that sort of scenario, like the hormones are going all, and there's growth spurts and everything else. But tell me what you do to instruct, because we did speak beforehand. You say you got a program. I wrote down teachers and students. Is that the market that you work in, or
no? Actually, I was even brought into hairdressers to speak to staff. Yeah, about looking at signs that someone might come in that they and it's not for the hairdresser to become a counsellor. That's not it. But that could be the only safe place that someone has to speak privately, because their abuser is not going to sit there and be very obvious. So it's really around supporting. That would be around supporting the person, or just listening, and then saying, actually, do you know what? I heard of a service down the road. I'm giving them the number of that.
That's a great place to do that, actually. I never thought of that, because I obviously go to a barbershop, but I can imagine the people in the hairdressers. They're in there. My wife goes in there for an hour or 2 hours at a time for this, that, and the other, and to have that safe space to confine that person, you get to know these people after many a year, and you do speak to them about their personal lives and so on and so forth. Like you're on a holiday, the normal thing, but it is recognizing those people. There's a slight change in them, and if they had the sort of the know-how to say, look, I do know these other people, that I do know this organization, I do know this person, that could maybe shed some light on what you're going through at the moment, or just someone to speak to. I think that's wonderful.
And giving them a safe space. Say, look, do you want to go into the back there and make the phone call? You won't be disturbed. So it's giving them that safe, haven to make that phone call, because they may not have that at home, especially with lockdown.
Yeah.
I mean, the intensity of abuse just escalated during the lockdown, because there was nowhere getting away from your abuser.
Absolutely.
When everybody worked outside the home, you had those 8 hours or whatever. Or even if they went out with their friends, or went football, or went to dancing, or whatever it was, you had at least a couple of hours to wind down, or to just get your bearings, or prepare yourself for the next stage. So, like with the teachers, and so what I have done in the past is run seminars around teenage intimate abuse, and looking at. I mean, yourself, teenagers, the brain develops at such a speed during teenage. Yeah, that's why they need more sleep. I know I don't want to be telling teenagers, yeah, you have an excuse to sleep more. But it's looking at, teenagers are just developing. It's such a vital stage, and they're only developing their identity. They're testing out so many identities. Who am I? What am I? What do I like? Who do I like? What do I want to be perceived as? So much going on, and that's just the basic stuff, and then you have, the school, the teachers, well, yes, you've 8 subjects a day. Where's my homework? You should be doing this. And then you're expected to do sports or music or, and then if you have someone who's also in your head saying, why didn't you pick up after the 3rd ring? Where were you? You couldn't be in the bathroom for longer than 5 minutes, for God's sake, or who are you talking to? Who are you going out with? And with the cyber as well, like with the tech. I mean, oh my God. They're having to accept video calls when they're out with their friends to show exactly where they are, who they're with, and what they're talking about. And instant, I want your PIN numbers, I want your passwords. If I can't trust you, how can I go out with you and how can I love you? And there's private conversations between friends now on view to this other person. And then they have that ammunition. Well, I'm going to tell them you told me this. So there's a lot of it's very difficult for a teenager. It's very difficult for an adult to get around this situation. So imagine as a teenager with all the other stuff going on, and and then having to do, is this abuse? Is this normal? Is this control? Is this, who do I go to? Who do I turn to? So there's always behavioural changes, and again, I cover that in the full thing. I know I won't I won't take up 2 days of your time going through this, but
it doesn't matter. It's important that you give a message across. Something I was going to ask you actually, if you were to give one sound piece of advice or a gift to someone now, in advice of something that you can just share, because this audience will be UK and a bit of Ireland, and like you've come across extremely well in this, and you've really elevated the knowledge out there, because there's a lot of it I didn't know at all. So what one thing could you say just to pass on or share a bit of knowledge now to the audience, so that they can better sort of recognize a situation or whatever it might be?
One thing, well, there's
probably, I know there's several things.
Yeah. But one thing, what I would say, and this is something that every person that I have asked has been able to identify, again, on reflection. So at the beginning of a relationship, there will be a gut feeling. There will be something instinctual telling you that's off. So sometimes because there's so much going on, and you'll say, oh, no, and you'll dismiss it. But it's a niggling thing, and you'll dismiss it. And then because the rest of it is built up, so this is at the beginning. There's something that's off, and you're not sure what it is. You can't put your finger on it. You need to listen to that. You need to explore exactly what that is. And if you're not sure what it is, ask a trusted friend, a trusted, ring up and ask, there's absolutely no harm ringing up a support service. Chat to somebody if you're just not sure, because rather than, go into a long-term abusive relationship, which could be, the deaths, especially in UK the stats they're horrific. And, during lockdown, it's scary what has been going on. So just that's one thing I would say, because that's an early warning sign.
Yeah.
There's always been a niggling something.
I would always trust your gut as opposed to the head. The head is a bit irrational, a bit all over the place, but we all should trust our gut feeling, because they're the most prominent feeling that you can ever have. Once you get that gut feeling and you really go, oh yeah, that something's not quite right, because the head is going to be up in the land of the fairies, really. It's going to be all over the place, and it's very emotional, and it works in some ways really well, but other ways it, especially when you're in a sort of a relationship like that, which is not right, the gut feeling is telling you to get out. I was just about to swear then, get out, because it's not quite right.
Yeah, it actually provokes that language in us, doesn't it? Because it's, it is so horrible. But
so,
yeah.
So Suzanne, we're probably coming towards the end now, and like we could probably carry on for another hour, I suggest, and maybe we'll do it again. But how do people find you? Not sitting in your house now, but where can they find you online? Where can they find you online
Okay,
to get in
well,
connect?
yeah, so I can. My email is, if anyone has any, questions after watching this, or comments or whatever, I can be emailed at suzanne.glow@gmail.com.
And how
So
do you spell Suzanne? Because there's
S
several
U
different
yeah, there's quite a few I've noticed.
spellings. Yeah, yeah.
SUZANNE.
Okay.
So that's glow, GLOW, @gmail.com. So my website is currently being built. So I hope to have that up and running soon. I'm also on Instagram at Glow Coach. So
Okay.
you can follow me there. And sometimes I put up, slides that I have from different presentations or seminars that I've done, and I put up some information around it. And I will be launching some podcasts around this as well soon.
Cool.
So, and I do have a 2-hour online workshop through Zoom.
Okay.
So again, if someone is interested in that, drop me an email, connect with me on Instagram. I'm also on LinkedIn, and you'll be able to get to my LinkedIn.
So that's LinkedIn /Suzanne Doyle -580 19530. But if you do a search, you'll definitely find Suzanne Doyle, coach, trainer, and facilitator at Glow Coaching. So you'll definitely find Suzanne on there. Look, really appreciate that. You've been extremely full of all wonderful information, which can help people recognize where they're at and look for advice, whether it's through you or they just reach out for someone just to help.
Yeah.
And to listen to. So thank you again. You've been listening to Jason Cooper today from Serenity Radio.